All right, hey folks. So today I want to talk about something that has been on my mind just a little bit, and it's something I've observed pretty much every single time I've gone to a public range anywhere, and even also sometimes out in the desert, and that is flinching related to when your gun is empty. Okay, so the whole topic of this is basically knowing when your gun is empty and what to do with that, and how to kind of I guess improve your shooting overall just a little bit, and it might help with certain situations where you may need to facilitate a reload for whatever reason, defensive purposes, a competition shoot, things like that. But it's also getting to the heart of repetition, experience, and knowing your weapon, right? So I've got three different guns here to kind of illustrate my point, and we'll just start off with the most common one. So I've got here my HK VP9, right? And this is just a general like analogy for pretty much any auto-loading pistol that will lock back on empty like that, right? So the issue I'm seeing at ranges is that someone will typically load up an entire magazine full and they'll put it in their gun, charge it, whatever, and they go bang, 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 bang. But then when the gun is empty, what they'll do typically, so like doing like a side profile shot here, what they'll do is they will do that on the next shot when it locks open on empty, right? So they'll have their one that's there, last round, they fire it, boom, the slide comes back, it goes like this, it locks open, and then when they go to pull the next one, they do that, right? And there's a few reasons why people do that. Flinching is definitely a common issue that occurs for lots of newer shooters and people who are a little more recoil sensitive. I know that was definitely a thing for me when I was younger, growing up, because pretty much the only pistols that we had were 22 LR and 45 ACP out of a 1911, right? So kind of two big differences there in terms of recoil. But flinching was definitely a issue for me with the larger caliber pistols. So, but that is a common issue for anybody really when they're just getting out shooting. So you don't want to do that for a number of reasons. One, you look kind of dumb when you do that. Two, it kind of illustrates to you, or if you're observing this, it kind of illustrates that they're not really shooting correctly. That is, at least my technique anyway, of shooting to surprise, right? It's what they usually say. But it also demonstrates a lack of knowing that your gun is empty, and that can be a big thing. And the two biggest points to me that stick out for auto-loading pistols is your sight picture, right? So this obviously I modified just a little bit to my taste, but when you have enough experience and reps behind your pistol, and really this applies to a lot of other pistols too once you get more experienced, is you kind of, when you have your sight picture, you kind of understand what that's supposed to look like in your head, like the kind of the mental picture of what you're supposed to see, right? So you absolutely do hold the pistol at a certain distance from your eyes, and that is kind of framing, if you pull it closer or further away, you're framing what that correct sight picture is supposed to be. So if you've got it way too up close, like way next to your face, yeah, it's going to look obviously a little different than if you're holding it like way, 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 way out here, right? Versus, your typical distance that you're going to hold your pistol at. So when you have that kind of mental picture there of what it should look like, when the slide locks back like this whole sight picture is moving back significantly versus this, right? It's kind of moving back like here. So when you see that, you should have in your mental picture there, hey, what I'm expecting to see is not there anymore, right? So that should be your first indicator, like, oh, my sight picture is a little bit different now. I wonder why that is. And all you got to do is take a little peek over the top and, oh yeah, it locked open for whatever reason, malfunction, jam, or you're empty, right? That should be your first indicator. Your second indicator should be the simple fact that the recoil impulse is going to be different. And this may be a little bit harder to tell for certain pistols, but you can absolutely feel the difference between when it just goes to load another round, when it's cycling correctly, versus when it has that kind of hard feeling where it just kind of ka-chunks and doesn't ka-chunk back forward, but just kind of gets in the back here, basically right at your point of balance here. You can kind of feel it lock open there. And this definitely comes down to experience, reps, practice with your particular pistol. Once you start getting that muscle memory for a feel of like, oh yeah, my gun's empty, and I can feel that it's empty, right? Some other weapons are going to be a little more obvious with that than others, particularly when it comes to an AR, right, like this one here. There is absolutely 100% a noticeable difference when the gun is cycling normally and feeding rounds, right, as you're shooting, versus when it fires that last shot and it locks open like that. You can absolutely feel it because it's not going to go forward as much during the recoil impulse, right? And you can kind of just feel the bolt basically getting stuck back here. And maybe also, depending on your particular AR, your buffer tube not twanging quite the same way, or not sounding the same. Something will tell you that it is operating differently when it goes empty versus just shooting it normally. And again, that also comes down to knowing your weapon, getting the reps in, getting the muscle memory, knowing what to expect, knowing what to look for, and kind of understanding how the rifle sounds and feels when it's either jammed or run empty. So that is a big indicator for me. The third thing also is weight. So particularly with auto-loading pistols like this that have outrageous magazine capacities these days, right? A 17 round mag like this will definitely feel a lot different according to weight than an empty one, or one that is approaching empty. Like say you got 5 rounds in there, right? And part of my training regimen when it comes to pistols is load your magazines with 5 or maybe even 10 rounds, but very rarely do I ever load my mags completely up to full the entire time. And the reason for that is numerous, but you can absolutely feel a difference between a fully loaded magazine and an empty one. So that applies as well to your pistol. When you're having it in your gun like this, you can definitely feel a big weight difference in the bottom here of the grip and the balance of the gun when you have a bunch of rounds in your magazine. So as you're shooting along, going bang, 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 I'm not saying you have to count your rounds, but you will definitely get a feel for almost how many rounds you have left in your gun just based on weight alone. And also too, when it runs empty, it's going to feel obviously less heavy, right? And the center of balance and gravity and all that stuff will definitely change as well with the slide lock back and all of that. So the weight will definitely feel different. But again, that all comes back down to experience, the reps, knowing your pistol, knowing your weapon, right? Same thing with AR mags, right? A 30 round AR mag that's fully loaded is going to feel a lot heavier, than one that is got 5 rounds or no rounds left in it, right? Big difference. And you'll notice that when you start like actually carrying these things around, or maybe you're going for a competition shoot, or maybe you're just blasting out in the desert somewhere and you're carrying all this stuff on you, you will definitely start to feel the weight difference when you start going through your ammo. Now, one that is a little bit harder to do all of those things with is revolvers, right? So with revolvers, it's a little bit difficult to tell when you're empty unless you're counting your shots, but depending on situation, you may not be counting your shots. Like a defensive situation where you just need to blast as quick as you can, accurately as you can, or your competition shooting, or whatever situation where you just need to be fast with your revolver, it may be a little bit difficult to tell when you're empty, right? But if you have a normal 6-shot like this, or even a 5-shot revolver, okay, you can absolutely get a feel for when you're running empty. So the weight aspect of it will matter slightly less because obviously there is less rounds in your cylinder, right? But a spent cylinder versus a fully loaded fresh one absolutely does have a weight difference in terms of the balance. You can feel it in the gun, definitely. It's obviously less than a 17 round 9mm magazine or a 30 round AR mag, right? It will be slightly less, but it is noticeable. So, but again, that all comes down to knowing your gun. The other part too is once you have really shot your revolvers quite a lot, and let's say your particular model is a 6-shot, because most are, you just kind of get an inner sense of how many shots you have shot, basically, when you're trying to go fast in between things, or even when you're at the range, and you're trying to get some really precise groupings, and you're like, well, maybe I only want 5 shots in this group, or maybe I only want 3, or something like that, or you're doing whatever kind of practice and drills that you're doing, you just kind of get a sense for how many rounds you have left in your gun. But that all comes, like I said, with time, experience, muscle memory, reps, getting those shots in, doing that range time, getting your experience in, doing all of that. So yeah, revolvers are a little bit harder, but of course there is a way you can check. Very easy, just open up the cylinder and look at all the primers there and see what has been hit and what has been not, and you can kind of tell from there. I'm like, oh, okay, I've got that many shots left. Now, another part of that, though, of course, a little bit more revolver technique is, obviously, when you do open your cylinder like that, you want it to be indexed properly. If you're not going to reload, you want it to be indexed properly so your next shot is not one that's already spent, right? So you need to know which direction your revolver is going, and then index your cylinder appropriately so you understand that when you pull that trigger back and shoot, it will actually be a live cartridge and not one you've already shot. So a bit more of a revolver technique thing, but it does go into the kind of the theme of knowing when you're empty, indexing your revolver properly, that kind of thing. So this knowing all of these things with all these weapon platforms and stuff is I think is a pretty important skill to know, because you do look kind of dopey when, like I said, you're at the range here and you don't even notice your gun is empty, and you pull the trigger and you do your little dip there, or you're just doing this, you're like, oh no, why is my gun not shooting? Because if I can translate to a real world situation where, let's say, I don't know, you have your pistol out here and your pistol did run empty, or it jammed, right, God forbid, and you're sitting here doing this and you don't know why, because you didn't take the time to understand that, like, oh yeah, it feels a little different, it feels wrong, it feels off, there's something with the gun that didn't quite function correctly, or it is functioning correctly, you're just out of ammo, right? Because ammo will go very fast in a firefight, believe me. So yeah, you may think like 17 rounds is a lot of capacity for a gun like this. Oh, it goes fast. It goes fast. So you don't want to be sitting there looking dumb when you need to do a reload and you're doing this and your gun's not shooting. You're like, oh shit, drop your gun out, or drop your mag out, load another one, good to go. Getting that muscle memory down, that experience, those reps, right, to understand that that's what's happening, very, very important, because it could be your life or somebody else's, right? So, don't be the dudes, like, there's so many instances where cops do this, soldiers do this, anybody who uses firearms, like in the line of duty, there's been tons of cases where people have been caught, with their guns are empty, and they're just like, I don't know what's going on, like, what the heck? I see it in my M9 qualifications all the time, weapon quals, whatever, it happens. But with proper training, experience, and recognizing what is happening and what you're doing and being conscious of all of that during your training can prevent those instances from happening where you look like a dope, or, God forbid, you're in a defensive situation and you need to get that reload out quick or clear that jam. Just being conscious of that. So anyway, that's really the topic I wanted to kind of address, is, like I said, knowing when your weapon is empty or potentially jammed. So this is kind of just a broad range of weapons here to kind of demonstrate those kind of principles here, but it can apply to bolt actions, it can apply to shotguns. Shotguns are a little bit harder to do, especially with pumps, because you can just keep pumping that thing, phrasing, and not even realize you're empty because you're just pulling the trigger and nothing's happening, right? So be conscious of that. Some people will say it's better to count your rounds. Some people will say you're not going to have time to count your rounds. I'm somewhere in the middle, because getting a feel for when your gun is empty and how many shots you fired is sort of like counting your rounds, but not exactly. You just kind of understand when you're getting close to it due to all those factors I mentioned: your weight, your balance, how long you've been shooting, your engagement time, so on and so forth, right? I really do think in a lot of defensive situations or things where you're trying to go fast in, you're probably not going to be counting your rounds. But if you're at like a one-way range and you're just trying to get some groups or something, or you're trying to practice something specifically, I think it can be beneficial to count your rounds. That way you can kind of cage your brain in and know what to expect. Like, let's say, like for my pistol training, I put 5 rounds in the mag here, and I shoot 4. I can think to myself, okay, well now I should expect this next one to lock back open on empty, bang, and it does, right? So getting those reps down, and that's also partially why I do download my mags like to 5 or 10 shots is to get those reps in, to understand how that feels and what that looks like, right? But I can cover that in a different video. For my specific training techniques when it comes to getting those reps in, the muscle memory that you need, that is not so easily explained like in a classroom, because you can go to a tactical class and they can tell you till they're red in the face and give you as many PowerPoint presentations as they want, saying this is when your gun runs empty and this is that and this is that and the other, right? But I think for a discipline like this with firearms as what's the word I'm looking for? Kinesthetically involved as it is, right? I think you really do need to get the hands-on reps and understand what this feels and looks like when you're actually doing it. But that's just me. So anyway, topic that comes up, and I see all the time, every single time I go to the range, I always see someone messing it up, and it looks kind of silly. So, and it can also be dangerous too if you don't correct it. So, figured I'd bring that up and just kind of show you guys my thought process behind that, and hopefully how to address that and fix that. And as always, of course, get those reps in, understand your weapon system, get really familiar and intimate with it. All those things, phrasing, cool. So the more you know, the more experience you get, the better off you're going to be, better shooter you're going to be, of course. But there's a difference between mag dumping and trash and doing concerted effort training, right? So just keep that in mind. Anyway, that's all I gotta say about that. Hopefully you guys learned a little something from that and are making conscious efforts to understand this phenomenon and what happens and knowing when your gun is empty, because that's very important. So, all right, that's all I gotta say, and we'll see you next time.